I'm sitting on my back deck, looking over the yard, wearing that late winter jacket that is as much to break the wind as to keep me warm, and I'm drinking a mug of hot tea with lemon and honey. I'm holding the mug with both hands as it warms my fingers and palms between the sips that warm my throat and stomach. I can feel the warmth of the tea slowly radiating through my body, and between the sun and the tea, I'm feeling good. Sitting there, looking over the yard, I can't help but think of the old couple that had this house before me, and all the years they spent building the gardens and dropping little gifts in the ground that I am still discovering. I met them almost 2 years ago. They seemed nice and still loving toward each other after so many years. It was a bittersweet moment for me. I wonder what they thought of me at the time, and I want to thank them now, but I have no idea where they are. As I sit there, I hear a friendly voice from behind me. "Henry, you going to spend your whole Saturday just sitting there, or are you going to do something?" I can't help but smile. It's Craig, my next-door neighbor. He and his wife Cheryl were the first to welcome me to the neighborhood. They showed up at my door while I was waiting for the moving van. Craig and I are both electrical engineers, except I'm analog and he's digital. It makes for some friendly rivalry. I tell him he only knows 2 things, yes and no. His whole career is built on building circuits that say, yes, no, yes, no. He tells me that I spend so much time balancing inputs and outputs that I should work for the post office. What kind of friends would we be if we couldn't tease each other from time to time? I turn my head in his direction and call over my shoulder. "I'm going to sit here until I defrost, and my joints can move again." I can hear him coming up the 3 steps to the deck, and then he pulls up a chair. "I'm drinking tea. You want a mug?" "Hell yes. You don't have anything stronger, do you?" "Too early for me, but you're welcome if you want. You know where I keep it?" We head into the house, and I put the tea kettle on. By the time the whistle blows, I'm ready for my second cup, so I fix 2. I'm drinking mine with lemon and honey. I'll have my honey from the bottle. All kidding aside, it is early in the day, and I wonder what might be bothering my friend. He'll tell me when he's ready, so with 2 fresh mugs, we head back out into the sun and the warmth. We sit there for a time and just soak in the sun. Friends don't need to fill the void with talk. In time, when he's ready. I wish I knew what was bothering Cheryl. There it is. A man has 2 kinds of frustration. When it's the world that's bothering him, he'll rant and rave and yell at the moon. When it's his wife, he grows quiet. "Have you tried asking her?" I asked. He looks at me like I'm crazy. "Yeah. I've asked repeatedly. I've asked every way I can think to ask. I've been direct, indirect, logical, subtle, and nothing works. She just says that nothing's bothering her and to leave her alone." "I've never met a wife yet who wanted to be left alone when she was happy," I answered. He gives me a look that says, "I know." I'll tell you what really angers me. Last September, when I was feeling all that stress from the deadline on the GM chip job I was working on, I would work all day, then come home and work after dinner. You know what she did? She would come in the den and just sit with me. She never tried to talk or distract me. She would just sit there with a book and read. She'd sit there and I'd feel my blood pressure dropping and I'd grow calm, and then my head would clear and we'd talk a little and I'd get my work done without the frustration. When she figured I'd worked enough, she'd coax me off to bed, and as often as not, she'd just cuddle up next to me and I'd start to feel like all was right with the world. "Rough life, man. I feel for you," I answered. He snorted. "I'm not complaining about that. Work was hell, but life was good. Now I can tell she's upset. She's distant, distracted, ill-tempered, so I try to do the same thing for her that she did for me. I'll come into the living room, sit in a chair near her, and she gets up and leaves the room. It's like, wherever I am, she wants to be someplace else. I'm not asking anything of her. I just want to sit in the same room with her. I fix a snack, but she complains it's too fattening, or she isn't hungry. But it's never, no thanks. It's always more like, Damn it, you know I'm watching my weight. I tell you, she's not easy to love right now. I couldn't help but smile a little when he said that. In the time I've known him, I've learned 3 things above all else. Craig is generous, he is patient, and he loves his wife. Can I tell you something just between the 2 of us? I thought all of this was just between the 2 of us, I replied. Well, yeah. I can barely remember the last time we had intimacy. It's not that she's just disinterested. Whenever I bring it up, she becomes downright hostile. I mean, you'd think I'd insulted her family or something. And with the things she says when I try to initiate any kind of intimacy, you'd think I was just using her for my own pleasure. I tell you, she's damn hard to love right now. We sat there for a time, both quiet with our own thoughts. He was consumed by his thoughts, and I was trying to find the right thing to say. I finally broke the silence and said, I have to tell you honestly that I never had that problem with Claire. I don't know why or how, but it seemed that we were always able to communicate. I remember when we would talk long into the night about whatever was bothering one or both of us. She never made me feel that it was her against me. We were always us against the world. I think I'll always be grateful for that. Henry, I'm sorry I never met Claire. I really am. The way you talk about her, she must have been something very special. Oh, don't get me wrong. She had her moments. I couldn't help but smile. I figured it was time to bring out and dust off one of my favorite quips. It seemed appropriate to the moment. She could be difficult. I often think about going back to the priest who married us and saying, you know when you said that marriage takes work? Well, that really doesn't cover it. That finally got a laugh out of my friend. No, I don't suppose it does. I hoped that I'd helped my friend. He seemed calm and relatively quiet by then, so we sat and sipped our tea until we were both warm and satisfied. We talked about work a little, and eventually, Craig went back to his house to work on his patients and whatever was bothering his wife. As I sat there, alone again, I ruminated on the past. No, marriage isn't easy. That much is true. But it's the most worthwhile thing I've ever done. I am far from the man I was when I met Claire. She changed me. From her, I learned patience and confidence in myself. Before her, I'd never had either. I could persevere and work long hours toward a goal, but that's not patience. As for confidence in myself, I knew I could do the job. But deep down, I doubted whether I had anything to offer anyone other than my work and a superficial friendship. She changed all that. I came to see myself through her eyes and started to believe that I was a man worthy of being loved. A wife changes a man, and a good wife changes him for the better. The other kind of wife erodes his self-respect and prevents him from becoming the man he could be. There is probably no more powerful force in a man's life than his wife, and she has more influence on the kind of man he will be and the life he will live than any other being on earth. She has even more influence than the mother who raised him. It was turning cool, and my tea was gone. Time to go inside. I may yet start a little fire in the stove tonight. It may be warm in the midday sun, but the nights aren't warm yet. I check the small pile of wood by the stove, and there's enough if I choose to start a fire. It's too early to think about dinner, so I settle down at my desk and work for a few hours. In time, I'll reheat some of the stew that I made last night, pull a roll from the bag, and pour myself that beer that Craig's had me thinking about ever since he visited. I'll turn on the radio, keep it low, and spend a quiet evening with my thoughts. Looking back, my thoughts a year ago were dark and brooding. I was filled with anger. It was hard to spend a quiet evening without the rage overtaking me, and I would search for a distraction. With an old house, there are always things that need to be done. I painted every wall, repointed the chimney bricks, pulled up the rugs, and refinished the floors. I still had work to do in the basement, but for now, it was fine for storage. It was an old house, but the basement was dry, and I was grateful for that. Work the next week was routine. The team was working on a new design for a compact radio receiver. It's not the sort of radio you might normally think of. It was conceived to be part of an inexpensive array of radio telescopes. There was an idea of building many of them and distributing them around the country to form one large but disjointed instrument. The size of the array was its strength, but if each node didn't perform as conceived, the array would not outperform the smaller, more expensive arrays. I wasn't sure we could do it, but there was money to try, and it was a challenging idea, so I threw myself into the project. Work has never been a 9-to-5 proposition for me, so around quitting time I would pack my case and head home with an evening of work planned. By Friday, I had 5 steady days of work, and more work, and it was time to relax. The problem is I've never been very good at relaxing by myself, so I picked up a pair of steaks and 2 potatoes at the store and decided that I would fire up the grill. Now you're wondering why I got 2 steaks. I'd like to tell you that I had a hot date, but I don't think I'd done so much as hold a woman's hand these past 2 years. And you can forget intimacy. I don't even remember how. No, when I grill a steak, I grill up 2 and put 1 in the fridge. I'll slice the cold steak sometime over the weekend and fix a sandwich. Then I'll throw the extra spud in the microwave and call it Saturday's lunch. When you live alone, cooking becomes more utilitarian than anything else. That Friday night didn't turn out as I expected. I had the grill hot and the steaks were cooking when Craig stepped onto the deck. Mind a little company? Not at all. Do you mind a steak medium rare? It would be a sin to cook it any further, I answered. I looked up at my friend, and while he was smiling, I sensed he was putting on a brave front. He walked like a man carrying a burden, and there was no sparkle in his eyes. I brought a 12-pack of IPAs. I can't be showing up empty-handed. You're an upstanding young man. I see your father brought you up, right? He smiled. Actually, it was Mom. She liked a cold one every now and then. We settled into our chairs, sitting close to the grill to stay warm, and we each drank our first beer. When the steaks were ready, we plated our meal and headed for the kitchen table. 2 guys facing steak and potatoes with some cold beers don't worry about getting fancy. I got a second plate, fork and steak knife, and then went to the fridge for a stick of butter and a tub of sour cream. Sorry, I didn't have time to fry the bacon. That's okay. If you aren't doing anything for breakfast tomorrow, I'll buy and we'll get all the bacon we could want. I shook my head. Can't be done. He was laughing, the first real laugh I'd heard from him that night. We can try. Dinner was a pleasant affair, and we both had stories about work, mostly bad-mouthing management at our respective shops. Craig straightened up and looked me in the eye, stabbing his fork in my direction to make the point. There is no expert so knowledgeable, so insightful, and so certain as a manager who can't do the job himself. I raised my glass. To experts. To managers. And may they never meet. Well, I told you we had a lot in common. When dinner was through, I suggested we take the remaining beer to the living room and find some comfortable chairs. I had no dessert to offer him, but with a few more beers, we didn't need any. The conversation ranged over many subjects from music to politics to the women in our respective offices. We were both quiet after a time, and I decided it was time to ask the big question. So, how come you're a bachelor tonight? My friend grew even quieter, if such a thing is possible, sat unnaturally still, and his eyes had that faraway stare. She went out with her girlfriends. Claire used to do that from time to time. She told me they had a rigorous 2-drink maximum, which was just enough to get silly. The truth is, I think they use each other for little reality tests. I think they complain about their husbands, and then they tell each other things like, "Oh, that's no big deal. Men are always doing that. It's just the little boy coming out," and stuff like that. I think she's having an affair. Well, there it was. No jokes would get us around that. How sure are you? I asked. No evidence, but things aren't right. She hardly talks with me, and she gets nasty for little to no reason. Everything I do is wrong, and every discussion degenerates into criticism and assessing blame. Then there's the snarky little attempts at humor that aren't remotely funny. It's like she's lost respect for me and I don't know what I did. Are you still talking with her? I asked. Many times. The first time I tried, she apologized and said she was just distracted by work. After that, she became dismissive and eventually she got downright nasty. It's clear to me she doesn't mind starting a fight whenever she wants to shut me up or get her way. And that takes an added toll. I think she's already left the relationship and just hasn't left the house. That was a lot to digest, and I sat there quietly thinking of what to say. I didn't want to push my friend toward destruction, but I wanted to assure him that he deserved better than that. Have you decided what you're going to do? I'm not sure. Tonight was the first time I've said it out loud. I have to tell you the pressure has been building in me for a couple of months now. I feel like the valve just blew and I can feel the pressure draining away if only a little. He kept staring into space for a time and said, "Now I'm just angry." I looked my friend in the eyes and said, "There's one thing I can tell you that I know is true regardless of what she's doing. Don't you do anything stupid. You have to keep your cool. And for God's sake, don't raise your hand to her whatever you do. She'll have the cops on you before you can say you're sorry, and the locks changed before you make bail." Craig was nodding, and he wasn't denying anything I said. The man was in pain. The conversation grew quiet after that. I suppose everything that needed to be said had been said. We spent the rest of the evening listening to an oldies channel on the radio, with talk moving from one superficial topic to another. Every so often he would mention some behavior or a slight to add to the growing list of disrespect his wife was showing him, and with every new addition, I would offer some poor attempt at understanding. The truth is, I didn't understand, and I would never understand a cheat. If Cheryl was cheating on Craig, I didn't know what to say to him. All I could do was be a friend, listen, and support him as best I could. He stayed late that night, and we agreed to have breakfast the next day. After too many beers, we changed breakfast to lunch. Once my friend went home and I was left alone, all that talk of Cheryl took my thoughts back to my marriage to Claire. What is it they say? Man makes plans, and God laughs. No, he wasn't laughing at me. But there was a time when I thought he was. There was a time when I doubted that he existed at all. How could a loving God do something so horrible, so heinous, that my life was forever over, rent, torn asunder, and burned to ash? No, it's taken 2 years, but finally, I have begun to see the fault wasn't his. I knew who my tormentor was, and I knew he was just as far out of reach. In time, I had come to the decision that it would not be the loss that would define me. It is the memory of once having, once holding, and sharing that I will carry forward. That is the decision I made over this last year. But deciding and doing are two very different things. Every day has been a struggle, but the struggle gets easier with time. 2 years ago, I was living in one of those god-awful McMansions in a new subdivision on the edge of town. My wife, Claire, wanted it. It was one of the few things that we never really agreed on. She always thought that the new was better, and I liked the old. Old things were comfortable, they were familiar, they had the bugs worked out and the hard edges smoothed. So we compromised and we bought new. That's what you do when you love your wife. You prioritize and pick your battles. If she wanted new, we'll get new. If she's happy, then I'll be happy. I was happy. I hated the house, but I went home to my wife, and that made the house a home. She wanted clean, unmarked, modern furniture. I liked worn, stressed antiques. We bought modern. We never had a comfortable chair in the whole damn house, but I was happy because I had her. Prioritize. We needed 2 cars because we worked in different directions. I drove a 20-year-old Volvo. She drove a 2-year-old Subaru. She hated my car and wouldn't ride in it. She said she was always afraid I'd break down on the highway, get hit by a truck while I worked on the car, and she worried a lot. I knew her car would get her there and back in any weather any day, so I never worried. Compromise. I had a butt-ugly house with modern furniture in a sterile subdivision where the oldest tree was planted just a year ago, but I also had the sweetest, most lovely, warm, soft, and loving wife to hold close at night, and I was happier than I'd ever been in my life. These were the memories that I eventually carried to bed with me that night, and I slept peacefully. Time passed, and with it, the last cold nights of winter were gone. I still had a cord of wood in the garage for next winter, and I'll get another when it's time. I started keeping the windows open both days and nights. On the days, with the warmer weather and open windows, I'd finally blown the stale winter air from the closed-up home and replaced it with the sense of spring. When a man lives alone, that's what passes for spring cleaning. The former owners planted lilacs around the property, and it won't be long before their intoxicating aroma fills the house. When the wind blows gently in the right direction, it can be a heady brew of lilacs and roses. Over the weeks between early spring and mid-May, I saw my friend and neighbor regularly. Truth be told, I saw him too regularly, and he always had a sad tale to tell. His marriage wasn't getting any better. Cheryl was staying out late more nights than she was home, and when she was home, she was a difficult woman. Craig was on his last nerve, and I could see it in his face. His love and his patience were both gone. I suggested counseling several times, but he said she refused to go. I had offered to let him stay at my place for a time, thinking that a time out might cool the fires of hell, but he never took me up on my offer. I was preparing to suggest a good lawyer, but the end of his marriage came more abruptly than I anticipated. She left me. That was all he needed to say. We just sat there on my back deck, drinking our beers and waiting. A moving truck came while I was at work, and she moved out. Did she say why? I asked. She tried to say it was me, and threw every insult at me that she could think of. She said I ignored her, and I wasn't meeting her needs. She said I was boring, and she was tired of cleaning up after me. That's a laugh. It's been months since she did anything around the house but sleep, get dressed, and go out. I tried to talk with her, reason with her, and then she went nuclear on me. I'm told every wife tells her husband the intimacy is bad when they're leaving. It's so common it's a cliché, I replied. Yeah, she said that, but that's not what I meant. She said she'd lost respect for me. Did she give a reason? I asked. She didn't have to. These past months, all she could talk about were how brilliant and rich the lawyers she worked for were. They wear expensive suits and drive expensive cars. She seems to think they exude power, prey on the weak, and leave nothing but scraps for the little people. The little people like engineers? I asked. Yeah, and everybody else that doesn't show contempt for the people around them. It was a quiet night with occasional conversation of divorce law, as if we knew anything about that and how he could protect himself. This much we knew. We lived in a no-fault state, and she made nearly as much as he did. There were no kids. They both had their own car. They were still relatively young, so things like community property and investments weren't a big issue. The divorce should be simple enough. I gave him the name of a friend in the family law business, and he promised to make an appointment for Monday. I offered him a room for the night, but he said that Cheryl had left, and he'd be damned if he would let her force him out of his own house. I repeated my warning not to do anything stupid and watched my friend trudge back to his house. I knew he'd be drinking heavily that night. With news of his broken marriage and a type of closure on the pain he'd been feeling for many months, my own thoughts again drifted back to my marriage and how I came to be here. It's taken 2 years now, but I'm finally starting to feel settled into this house. It took a strange and unfinished path to get me here. One man carried the responsibility for it all. Just one man who changed the direction of my life forever. Peter Harris. That was his name. Peter, the drunk, worthless. Harris. Peter. One for the road. I can hold my liquor. It's just a 10-minute drive, Harris. Claire was working late. It was that time of year in her office. Harris ran a red light and hit Claire's car in the driver's door. They used the jaws of life to cut the car open and get her out, but she was DOA when I got the call, and life as I knew it was over. I was a walking, empty shell of a man after that. I raged at the world and I cried endless tears. When I finally got myself together and went to find the worthless drunk, he was already behind bars and he stayed there. In fact, he died there. One of the inmates had lost his mother to a drunk driver. Now he's facing a murder trial and Harris is buried deep in the ground. How do you take revenge on a dead man? I had only one option left to me. So one night I went to the cemetery and I pissed on his grave. It gave me no comfort. He wasn't worth the effort. That was the start of so many long, lonely nights. The house held so many memories of Claire that I saw her ghost in every room. My therapist told me I needed to move on, and eventually I knew I couldn't do it in the house we shared. So I sold the McMansion with most of the furniture, bought a small, older home from a lovely older couple, and settled into building a new life with old memories. It was slow work, and even now I was far from moving on. The pain had lessened, and the memories were warmer, but I was still a man mourning his wife, and I knew it. Over the next weeks, Craig was a frequent visitor. I would occasionally show up at his door with a six-pack and a pizza, but I made sure he knew he was always welcome at my place and mostly left him to come or go as he pleased. Cheryl was being generous, or what passes for generous from a wife without a shred of interest in the life she left behind. She let him have the house, but they had so little equity in it that it was hardly an act of generosity. They split their limited savings down the middle and each kept their cars and their retirement accounts. It was a very civilized modern divorce that left him sitting alone at night and wondering why. It was about 5 months after she dropped the bomb on him, and we were again sitting on the back deck. It was fall now. The older trees around the property were showing their colors, and the garden was put to bed. I just wish I knew what I did to deserve this. I tried to give her everything she wanted. I thought she was happy. I keep thinking back and I can't figure out where I failed. You didn't fail, Craig. I don't think you'll find your answer there. Then why? He asked. Honestly? I didn't know if I should answer him. My best intentions get me into trouble every time. If I tell you what I think, Cheryl won't come off looking very good. Then next week or next month, maybe next year, if you two get back together, you'll resent what I said. That's the kind of luck I have. Trust me, you couldn't say anything that's worse than I've been saying to myself. He answered, Okay. Cheryl is the kind of woman who always wants more. She wants whatever she doesn't have and more than you can afford. Craig, she moved on because she thought she could do better, and that's the simple truth of it. She can't do better than you, but what you offered isn't what she wants. My friend was quiet, and I wondered if I'd gone too far. Then again, in for a penny. Craig, Cheryl has always admired importance, power, and prestige. You said it yourself. She worshipped those lawyers she works with like they could walk on water. Is that the kind of man you want to be? He was shaking his head. You're smart, kind, generous, patient, and fundamentally decent. Whatever Cheryl was when you married her, she became a woman who no longer values those things. I think you need to face the fact that her head got turned by someone or something, and she's no longer walking the same path as you. You think she's hooked up with one of those lawyers? I think it's a possibility, I replied. Craig took a deep breath and thought about it for a long time. That would explain a lot. The woman I married would never cheat on me, but this last year Cheryl hasn't been the woman I married in any way, and she seemed to get further and further from that woman with each passing week. I'll tell you one thing I believe, and maybe it will help you. A wife who cheats, if Cheryl was cheating, is no wife at all, and you're better off without her. He was quietly nodding his head and eventually spoke. Maybe it's better this way. If I'd known she was cheating when she was living here, I don't know what I'd have done. Maybe it's better she lied to me and just left without a warning. If I had to face her knowing that she was cheating on me, I don't think I could have taken it. I wasn't sure if I was helping or hurting my friend and decided to back off a little. Hell, there was no doubt in my mind that Cheryl had cheated on my friend. I noticed her evolving behavior in the months after I moved in. She was pleasant at first, but as she became more comfortable with me, She would drop the pleasant facade and make dismissive little remarks about money and geeks. That wore thin real fast, but I held my tongue for Craig's sake. In time, I came to believe she was little more than a shallow, greedy woman that controlled my friend with smiles and intimacy. But I damn well never told Craig that, and I wasn't going to go that far tonight. Maybe it's best if you don't know. The possibility alone is painful enough, and considering it could help you to let go, the reality might just build layers onto the pain and bring more things to light that you can't do anything about. Maybe it's best just to let sleeping dogs lie. Don't think that reference to sleeping dogs was an accident. That summed up my evolving opinion of Cheryl. Maybe, or maybe the reality will help me even more, he replied. Either way, remember what I told you before. Don't do anything you will regret. You're a good man, Craig, and you don't need more pain and more problems now. Whatever you learn, just let it go and move on with your life. My friend was nodding his head, but I could see he was thinking, and I knew they were dark thoughts. I'd been in a similar place not so long ago, and I knew it didn't lead anywhere good. Why don't you spend the night here? The guest room is made up. Thanks, but I'm going to live in my house. That's one thing that's still mine. Okay. Breakfast tomorrow? I asked. That, at least, brought the glimmer of a smile to his face. Bacon. I'm in the mood for bacon. When are you not? So the evening ended on a light note. But again, I watched my friend make his way home like a broken man who'd lost it all. And why not? He had. Breakfast the next day found my friend in better shape than the night before. He said he'd gotten his first good night's sleep in months. He admitted that the possibility of Cheryl having an affair was one he had considered, but until last night he'd never admitted it was possible. Now it seemed more than possible, and his loss was somehow diminished. Over breakfast, we decided that we both needed a distraction. So, what do two engineers do when they need a distraction? We started by hitting the car shops. The new models were coming in, and we wanted to test drive something fun. Sure, we disappointed some salesmen, but we had fun doing it. Then there is a shop in town that sells interesting rocks and fossils, so we decided to check it out. We left there with our wallets a bit lighter and our geek cards punched, then headed to a favorite BBQ place for a late lunch of ribs and brisket. We spent the afternoon with the parts catalogs and started looking at components. We wanted to build something fun, probably several somethings, and we started throwing out ideas. It was too late for any spyware to change either of our lives, but there are chips now that combine GPS with ham radio transmitters that can be made to report its location periodically. I didn't know what I wanted it for, but I had to have one. I also decided that I wanted to build a miniature Geiger counter. Don't ask me why, but as soon as I saw those little Russian tubes, I knew I had to build one. Craig went for the Raspberry Pi chip and decided to build a small computer. Then, too, he got it into his head that he was going to build a high-end atmospheric monitor. He started with temperature, humidity, wind, and all the usual stuff. Then he added sensors to measure particulates and ozone. The latter was a bit pricey, but the idea fascinated him. Again, why wasn't one of the questions we were asking. We were just two boys having fun. We were getting our geek on. I had some leftover lasagna in the fridge, and with some salad and a little red wine, we finished the evening feeling pretty good about ourselves. One day doesn't put to rest all the pain he was living with. I knew my friend, and from time to time I could see the pain in his eyes. He hadn't forgotten his problems, but for one day they were pushed to the back of his mind, and he was enjoying himself. I decided that I would not bring up the divorce unless he chose to, and after dinner, as we sat in the living room, he did. You know, I don't even know where she is. I thought she was staying with her folks, but when I called there, they said she was staying with a friend. They wouldn't tell me who. The conversation was difficult to say the least. I told them I've never harmed her in any way, ever, and I wasn't going to start now. I just wanted to talk with her, but they wouldn't tell me where she was. Her mother actually cried over the phone. My lawyer says to stay away and don't even think about going to her office. They'll call the cops on me when I'm still getting out of the car. 6 years, man, 6 years, and I can't even talk to my wife while she still is my wife." "Have you been served?" I asked. "Yeah, that happened 2 days after she left. I never told you? She was prepared in advance, had the papers ready, had the movers hired, and even had a new place to live. It's cold, man." Once again, I didn't know how far to take it. There were things I wanted to say, but I was afraid of hurting him even more. Actually, I was still worried that if I went too far and told him what I really thought, it might damage our friendship. People living with the pain of betrayal can be surprisingly protective of those who have hurt them. I suppose that's the optimism of holding on to the dream and the hope that somehow things will go back to the way they were. Or is it the loss of eroding the memory that he wants to hold pure and untainted? Meanwhile, Craig's pain and my own were starting to meld together in my psyche. Our stories were separate, but his pain was becoming too real for me, and I knew that his pain was triggering the pain and anger of my own loss. I never had the chance to even the score with Harris, and now my friend was holding the short end of the stick from his own broken marriage and suffering at least as much. I decided that his lawyer may have given him some very good advice about avoiding any contact with her, but I didn't need to take it. I knew there had to be more to the story than Cheryl was admitting. I told my boss on Monday that I was going to be leaving work early and had some errands to run. He knew my work habits and never blinked an eye. In fact, he chuckled, shook his head, and just waved me off with the back of his hand. He's one of the good guys. I parked in the strip mall lot across the street from Cheryl's office when it was almost time for her to leave. I had longer to wait than I expected. It was more than 90 minutes after office hours when I saw her finally leaving with a suit. He had his arm around her waist, and there was a pretty serious makeout session at the car. It wasn't her car, and a darn sight more expensive than what she drove. So I'm assuming it was his, and they left together. I managed to follow them, and they wound up at a high-end restaurant. It was just a typical Monday night, and they were going to spend the kind of money that Craig could only spend on an anniversary. I couldn't go in to check on them. Cheryl would recognize me if I did, and I wasn't about to spend that kind of money on dinner, so again I parked across the street and waited. They took their sweet time, but eventually they left and headed for the western side of town. The house was significantly more impressive than the one she shared with Craig. I guess she felt that she'd found what she'd been missing. I did catch a glimpse of what I think was her car parked in the garage when the suit pulled in on his side, so I figured they were in for the night. I guess I had the answer to the question that Craig and I had pondered without conclusion. If Cheryl hadn't been having an affair before she left, she sure as hell started it up soon after. I finally had time for my own dinner, grabbed some carry-out, and headed home. Now it was time to answer the difficult question, should I tell my friend, or is he better off not knowing? I had other thoughts turning in my mind as well. Harris and the suit were both sharing the same place in my brain. Harris had destroyed my marriage, and it was clear to me that the suit at least had a hand in destroying Craig's. My hatred for Harris was all too easily transferred to the suit, and I was already thinking that this was one injustice I could do something about. Harris was out of reach, but the suit wasn't. These were dangerous thoughts, and they worried me. I didn't spend much time trying to discourage myself from balancing the scales. I've never in my life hurt a woman, and regardless of what I thought of Cheryl, I would never raise a hand to her. The suit was another matter. He was the kind of coward who screws around with another man's wife. He needed to pay. Now I knew who, but I needed to plan for how and when. I needed time, but I was patient. Craig eventually told me that Cheryl's parents had called him to, again, express their regrets and their embarrassment over their daughter's behavior. They were good people, and they saw that Craig had been a loving and dedicated husband to their daughter. Several times they had told him that they raised her better than this, but in the end, they had no control over her actions. They said Cheryl was coming to visit that weekend, and they would again try to talk some sense into her, but they added that the suit was not welcome in their home. Cheryl had admitted to them that the affair had gone on for months before she left her marriage, and I thought this might be my opportunity. I followed the suit, and Friday night he went out for a few drinks. I parked around the corner and waited for him in the parking lot. I've never ambushed a person before, and maybe I went overboard in planning. I ran a wire from a post set in the asphalt by the back of the building to the shadows maybe 8 feet away. The post was one of many set to keep cars from parking too close to the structure and provide a safe path for the clientele. I was ready, but the suit took his sweet time. Several individuals and couples walked by as I waited, but nobody noticed me crouching in the dark. Finally, as the suit walked by, I tugged the wire and he tripped forward, landing with his face and chest on the asphalt. 2 quick steps and an overhead swing brought the end of the bat down hard on his right hand, and I heard a very satisfying crunch. He groaned and instinctively rolled away from the pain. That was my opportunity to swing for the bleachers, and I hit the side of his left knee. There was a loud crack, and I knew he was out of commission. He was no longer in a position to defend himself, but I felt no mercy. One more hard swing to his junk and he convulsed and passed out from the pain. No one was running or seemed to hear his scream, so I quickly walked to my car and drove away. No police officers ever came to my door. No detectives ever questioned me. In the life of the suit, I was nobody of any importance. I didn't exist. It was the one and only time in my life that I ever did anything remotely like that, and I did not feel 1 ounce of regret or remorse. Time passed and my heart no longer raced whenever I saw a police car. The Arctic winds and blinding snow of winter were in full force. I was riding in the dark every morning, driving to work in the dark, going home in the dark, and falling asleep in the dark. A man needs friends to bring light and warmth to his days when winter places its heavy grasp on the world. A funny thing happened after Cheryl left, and I was unaware of it for a long time. Friends and neighbors up and down the street started visiting Craig the same way they had visited me shortly after I first moved in. They knew his pain and they reached out to give support in his time of need. In the depths of winter, parties sprang up and Saturday evenings became a time of music, good food, better drink, and laughter. Craig was doing very well, and I, it seems, was better too. It was at one of these parties thrown by a neighbor down the street that Craig quietly took me aside and said, "I don't know if I ever told you, but I did learn that when Cheryl left me, she moved straight in with one of the lawyers in her office. She never spent so much as one night on her own. She just slipped smoothly from one man to the next. I've got to say the anger from that singular act of betrayal pushed a lot of the hurt out of me and became my means of recovery." Rejection by someone you love is a hard thing to accept, but I suppose betrayal puts the loss in perspective, I answered. Funny thing about that lawyer. He got mugged one night coming out of some fancy bar he frequented where all the customers are Mr. This and Counselor That. You'd think their parking lot would be a lot safer. I wasn't sure how much he might know and looked at him inquisitively. "Oh, I didn't do it. The police paid me a visit, but I was out on my first date in almost 7 years. The date was a bust, but at least I dipped my toe in the dating pool." He was smiling, and for the first time in a long while, I knew my friend was going to be okay. "Come on, you two. This is a party. I bet you're talking shop. Enough of that. Come on then, back to the music. I expect you both to mingle and have fun tonight." That was our hostess. If she weren't married, I'd seriously consider. Time passed and the world grew brighter. Craig was dipping more than his toe in the dating pool, and the smile I used to see was back. He inspired me, and I started taking the plunge myself. It was awkward at first, but it got easier. We even double-dated on occasion. We built those toys we got so many months ago and finally found the perfect use for them. We gathered up the youngsters from the neighborhood along with enough parents to drive and keep them organized, and we drove west for 2 hours. With a shoebox carefully fitted with electronics and a small camera, the kids held the weather balloon as we inflated it with helium and tied the shoebox and its parachute to a long cord below the balloon. On the count of 3, 2, 1 up, We let go of the balloon and watched it rise into the sky. The kids were elated, but for Craig and me, it was the celebration of our new lives. His instruments measured the atmosphere as the balloon climbed above 99% of the Earth's air, while mine measured the cosmic radiation pouring down from space. The GPS and ham radio allowed us to track the balloon's progress as the cars drove east following the balloon's path, and the Raspberry Pi gathered the data. The balloon beat us home, but we eventually found it sitting in a field, and we all celebrated. I like to think we might have inspired a few young geeks to follow their dreams that day. Only time will tell. As for the two older geeks, we were putting the pain of the past behind us and moving forward in the warmth and light of the spring sun. It's midday Saturday on one of those warm days of spring. The sun is out, and there is the promise of the coming summer. The snow is gone, and the crocuses have bloomed and faded back to the earth, waiting to bloom again. The daffodils are standing tall with their heads looking proudly across the shoots of daylilies breaking the surface. It was a long, dark winter of the soul, but new life is blooming. Life has returned to the land, and finally, also to two men still young and now hopeful as well. Like those daffodils in bloom and the daylilies now rising, we had for a time retreated below the surface where no one could reach us and held to that little spark of life that remained. At long last, it was time to live again. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.